A show based on the facts, honesty, the man, the myth, the legend. ChristiTutionalist Joseph M. Leonard.
Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP, in association with TheLibertyBeacon.com, and I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Leonard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. I really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics again. And joining us today is Kristine Sposato. And yeah, I'm part Italian on my mother's side. And while this, of course, is her married name, not her maiden name, it's like Sposato. Sounds like a pasta or an Italian dessert. I ain't tried it yet.
My husband would love that. His name is Tony, and he likes to kid with people and tells people at first his name is Tony Soprano. And he kind of looks like that. And they usually like do a double take and say, really? And he says, no, it's Sposato.
And I joke a lot about people's names, not to be mean, but to be lighthearted, because people who watch and listen to the show know I can never pass on lame puns, but mostly name association. You joke around, it's more likely to stick in somebody's brain that way.
It is.
And when you have a book like you do, you certainly want them to remember your name. But it is spelled Kristine, last name Sposato. And for those on BitChute, Brighteon, Rumble, and YouTube behind the scenes video, you could see her holding up her book, which we will, of course, get into. But the proverbial necessary first question, who the heck are you? Where are you from? All the nitty gritty.
I am happy to share nitty gritty. Well, not all of it, but some of it.
We want to know the skeletons in the closet.
All the juicy stuff. Well, let's see. I am originally from Wisconsin, and so I'm a cheesehead. I'm a Midwestern girl. Grew up on a little farm, and I can still consider Wisconsin home. I love it there. Came to Colorado in my 30s and have been here ever since. So I live on the western slope of Colorado, which is near the Utah border, with my husband and our 2 Australian Shepherd dogs. And it's just quite lovely here. And I was in higher education for 20 years. I was a higher education administrator, and which I loved. I loved my job. I loved students. I loved education. I love learning, and had a reverence for education. And over the years, the last years that I was still at the university, it became progressively more woke. The liberal philosophies and mentality came in and just took over. And I know I was a moderate. I wasn't necessarily even a conservative. And it just became so oppressive and so offensive. The things that were openly said, communicated, the things that were pushed not only on staff, faculty, but also on students and parents, that it just became a really hostile environment. My husband and I retired, and that's when we moved to the western slope of Colorado. And I wrote my book, and I wrote my book about my experience. I interviewed a lot of students and parents and also employees of different institutions around the country. And I shared their stories in the book.
Yeah.
And
Now, before we go more in depth in the book, I got to say, now that you mentioned Colorado, thank you. No, thank you. Now I've got John Denver. Colorado, Rocky Mountain High will be in my head all the rest of the day. So no, thank you.
I love John Denver, gotta say. I'm a huge fan.
But indeed, the book is called Student Voices Silenced. And you're a perfect fit for the show because ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, the show, as well as the book that accompanied it, came out last year. There is a whole section on protecting children / school reforms.
Right.
That I go into. Indeed, what I call the new core R's. They're more about peddling radicalism, raunch, perversion, and racist garbage through CRT. They're not helping tamp down racism. They're actually inflaming racism. As the old core R's, of course, reading, writing, arithmetic, history, there's an R in there. And I like to joke virology, even though the R don't belong there. A lot of our kids are too stupid to know the R don't belong there. Science, the same thing, right? China isn't peddling genderism. They're teaching biology.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just shocking. And Joseph, I wrote this, this book was published a year ago, last summer. And even at that time, people would say to me, no, it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. And I'm pleased that over the last year, unfortunately, it's come to light because of all the protests that were taking place on college campuses. So it really was elevated into people's consciousness how bad it is. But a year ago, I was feeling like I kind of had to fly under the radar and be careful who I talked to about the book, because so many people were offended by me talking about colleges are indoctrinating your kids. And now I'm glad that it's an open conversation and people are knowing what's going on in K-12. People are understanding what's going on in higher education.
And God can use things for his purpose. Right. The Wuhan hysteria led to the Zoom classroom, which led to parents seeing what's going on and finally getting their heads out of their hindsides and now understanding what's going on. And from what you're saying, there's still a whole lot of people, probably people without kids or people who just see school as, they're the daytime babysitter, don't pay any attention, therefore no clue what's going on.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM is your conservative flamethrower. Weekdays, Steve Gruber starts things off at 6 a.m. Gruber gives his perspective on the issues of the day. At 9 a.m., Glenn Beck blazes the airwaves with his nationally syndicated program. From noon to 3, it's Dennis Prager. At 3 o'clock, it's Wham's own Thayrone X. On the Edge, Thayrone tells it exactly as he sees it. At 6, it's The Dana Show, your conservative alternative. At 8, don't miss Joe Pags. Weekends are filled with conservative talk as well. Fingers Malloy, Thomas LeDuc, The Abolitionists Roundtable, A Moment of Clarity with Pastor Rick, Your American Heritage with Ed Bondarenka, Dave Janda's Operation Freedom, and Dick Kupke's Trigger Talk. You can even get links to Wham podcasts from Dave, Dick, and of course Thayrone, all from their pages on our website, whamradio.com. Keep it locked on Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM in southeastern Michigan, and whamradio.com anywhere in the world.
Well, and Joseph, I think a lot of people are like, me like I was a moderate. And, when the universities started coming to me saying, you need to introduce this curriculum into what you're doing with students. And it was inclusive. And I said, well, this is good. We should understand each other. We should become more compassionate. We should be more empathetic, sympathetic toward one another, understand each other's experience in the world. I was on board with all of that until I realized how extreme it was going, to the point that it was exclusive to another group. It didn't include understanding everyone. It became so divisive. This group is good, this group is bad. So it just flipped. It did a 180. And I think there's a lot of people like me that don't understand that still say, but isn't it good to understand each other? Yes, it is. But that's not what this is. That's not what's happening.
That's exactly right. On my terrorstrikes.info website, on the quotes page from my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book, I mentioned Animal Farm in the book by way of making additional point beyond what Orwell did. But on my quotes page at terrorstrikes.info, indeed, at the top, I start with, if Orwell were alive today, his sequel, the line would be, some animals get more equity in the form of special rights than other animals, because it's not about equality, it's about pandering special rights to some, and as you said, to the exclusion, not inclusion. DEI is not about inclusion. It's about special treatment for some over others.
Yeah. And I especially heard was offended by so much of this language that was acceptable that targeted white men in college, especially white Christian men. And, I had a student that worked for me that I knew fairly well. He started working for me over the summer semester. And, as summer, fall semester went on, he was more and more withdrawn, wasn't as engaged. And finally, he made an appointment and came in and talked to me and said, I'm resigning, I'm quitting. And I said, well, tell me about that. Tell me why, what's going on with you? And he said, I don't belong here. Okay, tell me some more about that. And he started talking about that which I knew he was a conservative Christian. And, in fact, he had asked me to not schedule him on Sundays because he always went home, went to church with his family, and went and had Sunday dinner with his grandma every week. So I was aware. And he said, there are things here at this college that I never even knew existed. And I said, well, what? He said, until I came here, I didn't know that a man could pick to be a woman. And everybody would say that's okay.
A delusion. Yes.
How I grew up, a man was a man and a woman was a woman. And here I have to agree with that. And he said, it just makes me sick inside. I can't do it. I can't do it here anymore.
Yeah. 2 points to your point. Tom McDonald, Canadian former wrestler turned rapper, lives in the U.S. now. Tom McDonald, the rapper, has a song called Straight White Male. It's a fun, comedic mocking of the reality to which you speak. Straight white males are the enemy.
Yeah.
Now, and did you see the God's Not Dead movie series? Again, perfect example. Christian, especially white Christians, under absolute assault in the original God's Not Dead movie. the professor immediately demands of the students write down, God is dead.
Yeah.
And that's not a fictional story. All four of the God's Not Dead movies are based on real life events, and at the end of the film, cross-reference sources of the cases brought against the education centers for violations of their First Amendment freedom of religion. It's not freedom from religion, or as the left wants, separation of church to state, wards of the fascist state. So you've recognized this, and kind of is a genesis of this book, because conservatives, again, the book title, Student Voices Silenced, really is about conservatives being silenced, or as I'm trying to get the label, us as ChristiTutionalists. Christian, because conservatives got that, Christian, conservative, liberal, all the negative connotations. I coined a new term until they start attacking that now, but
wow, what are they attacking?
Well, both the fact that it's about being Christian and biblical application of how the Constitution fits it, like community. Community is biblical. I say this over and over. It's voluntary. It is your and my Christian duty, personal commandment to be our brother's keeper through charity, which is voluntary. It's about lifting up. Communism, the bastardization of community, because Jesus wasn't a socialist. Yes, we are to take care of one another, but it also says a distinction between the unwilling versus the unable. I have no obligation to those who are unwilling to do anything for themselves. Communism, forced, theft, redistribution. It is not biblical.
Right. Well, just before I jumped on this podcast, I was, since we're talking about this, listening to the author of this book, and she's so smart.
We got hold on. We got to say it. You're holding up next gen Marxism, so that, because this is mainly audio, 20 platforms, only 4 places do people see the behind the scenes video. Yeah, you're holding up next gen Marxism, and I hear a lot about this book. It's a good book. Go on. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It was Katharine Cornell Gorka who was being interviewed about this book. And like I said, she is so smart and was really going into where this came from, that it started in 1989, and we were all just oblivious to this movement that was starting. And so it's really been going on for a long time, and now really has reached its peak, where they have infiltrated so quietly, every level of our educational institutions. They've reached our kids in our corporations, our churches. Our churches are corrupted by all of this as well. And that was something else I saw with college students is, to kind of appease their parents, they would say, well, I'm going to church. But the college towns are full of the super liberal Christian churches that are not conservative. They're not even necessarily biblical. They're pretty new age. They're pretty all about me. And the only thing that they like about God is that God will give us stuff.
They are the church of woke, not the church of Christ. Absolutely. Right. And exactly. And why I felt the need to start this show about us as Christians, those things that, because there's different flavors, different versions, different sects, denominations. It isn't Christ that commanded those things. It is man that has mucked all that up and created all these different versions with different sayings. Some have this, some have things made up added, some have things taken out. So I'm about what are the things indeed we agree on, Christ said, and focusing on those things as opposed to, like you said, the modern church of woke, all about self rather than God. Indeed. Let's talk about your app, but let me, which is Rise Conservative Student. It's not really about, as the saying goes, if you pardon the crudeness, lighting a fire under somebody's ass. That's what this show is. I'm about lighting a fire and getting people off their butts. But for those who indeed finally awaken from their woke stupor and realize a lot of the churches have gone away from Christ and to worldly woke, your app, I lost it. Rise Conservative Student is there for those as a tool who now want to take action, because the Bible says, reap to sow. That means act. You must do things. 2 Chronicles, pray, turn from wicked ways, I shall hear from heaven and heal your land. Turn from wicked ways means you, me, all of us get off our butts to do things to turn the land from wicked ways, and God will help. Not that we just pray, he'll wave a magic wand. No, we must act, and you've created a tool to help people act. Yes?
Yes, I have. And I also, want to emphasize that this also is, I call it for conservative and traditional students, that this age group might not be comfortable saying they're conservative. Like you said, that's associated with politics and not necessarily morals and values. So I like to, kind of open it up a little bit, but it's a place that students can go for affirmation and opportunities to learn and grow. It's based on student development. So it's things that they're going through anyway, but it's a resource for them to be able to come back and find where their foundation is. The content areas are resilience, independence, spirituality, and emotional intelligence. And it started from the book. I also have a coaching practice. So I developed curriculum for coaching college students. Well, the reality is college students are very busy, and a traditional coaching model doesn't meet their needs very well. And so processing through this, I realized, well, where do they go for information? They go to their phone. So that's when I took the curriculum from my coaching program and put it into an app. And so it walks them through different coaching programs and lessons. It has a coaching lesson that's videotaped. It's got a little quiz for them. It has journal prompts so they can process and explore a little more. It has a guided meditation or prayer in each lesson. So they can, if they're riding the bus, if they're going to sleep at night, they can just turn that on. It's audio. And there's also a community section in the app. So they can find other conservative students at other campuses that are like-minded, that they can connect with and be friends with and support each other through whatever is going on at their stage of development in college.
Yeah, and like you said, that's why I invented and trademarked ChristiTutionalist, to get away from conservative liberal, because indeed those are hyperbolic, supercharged words these days, and people zone out. Yep. They get emotionally charged and defensive. And like Dennis Prager says, and I mention it in the first CTP book, there is a difference between a classical liberal who can still be reached, a classical liberal who still believes in that tenet of free speech like a conservative does. So
Yes.
we don't want to alienate the classic liberals. As Prager says, there is a difference. I agree, from a classical liberal and a complete leftist ideologue. So yeah, I try to avoid those terms except for when it needs to be explained, because indeed, liberal conservative automatically is either positive or derogatory. In people, there's no middle ground, and you automatically lose people like the classical liberals. You can red pill, as the saying goes, and awaken from their woke stupor because they're not full-on hardcore leftists.
Right. And that's why I think that, both my book, Student Voices Silenced, and the app is very helpful and in a lot of ways necessary for all parents to really understand how to have conversations with their kids, know and be prepared for what their kids are going to be going through in college. There are a lot of middle of the road parents that aren't going to be thrilled about how their children are treated, I guess, when they get to college, to their university.
They're being taught what to think, not how to think. They're being pushed to the left, forced. Again, the community, voluntary versus the leftist communism, force.
Right. And I think traditionally wanted our kids to learn how to think. So, for example, abortion is a very heated debate, and you want your kids to think through and to grow and understand the breadth of the entire controversy, to come to a place that they believe in what they believe because they believe it, based on their background, based on what they've learned, based on their faith. And I think that's what most parents want for their kids, but don't know how to approach it because they don't really understand how it's happening.
Versus the twisted, warping, manipulative language. It's a choice. No, it's not. You're not for choice when it comes to light bulbs. You're not for choice when it comes to stoves. You want to ban my gas stove and force me to have so choice is just a convenient dodge to avoid dealing with the real issue of terminating another life. If you want to defend that position honestly and admit to what you're defending is one thing. The problem, of course, is they cannot and will not be honest about what they're talking about. Like you said, having at least an honest conversation, then people within thinking, not just manipulating their emotional state into siding one way or another. I tend to keep my shows around 30 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up. Of course, we want people to check out your book, Student Voices Silenced, and the app, Rise Conservative Student, available on Google Play?
Yes, Google and Apple.
Good. Now, do you have a personal website or a book site? Where do people go to find, obviously Amazon, but do you have your own personal website or whatnot?
I do. People can just Student Voices Silenced will get you to my website, and the books are indeed for sale on Amazon. So go look it up and get yours today. It's a guide for every parent. It tells you what to look for and how to talk to your students.
Yeah.
And get in the app, 7 days free.
Okay. Student Voices Silenced.com,
.com.
Okay. We don't want to make that assumption because that, in my mind, lends itself to being a .org kind of thing, or .info kind of thing. So
Right.
studentvoicessilence.com, and of course, I will include that link in the show notes. So thank you, Kristine, Kristine, right? Not Kristin. Kristine, spelled Kristine. I'm an Italian dessert, Sposato.
Thank you, Joseph. This has been really fun. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Take care. God bless.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for having tuned in for ChristiTutionalist Politics Show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you, or autographed copies are available online direct from me via terrorstrikes.info/shop. Be sure to check out more about today's discussion at thelibertybeacon.com, where my articles drop every Saturday. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come, but for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, no fancy high production intro or insert, at least yet, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast and share episodes. We need your help.
It is a myth that terrorism stopped during COVID. Unfortunately, mainstream media opted to prioritize pandemic hysteria over promoting all news. Terrorism continues. Simply hoping that it doesn't affect you is not a strategy. The new book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you, featured on The Author Show, is now available in paperback from bookstores, online, or as an ebook exclusively through Amazon Kindle. Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you by Joseph M. Leonard. Order today.